Closed Casket Jack is just sitting down to talk with the priest with red hands, surrounded by a crew of malevolent, familiar faces. Don't you dare listen to this before listening to part 1. I swear to God, I will fucking haunt you over it. And now, on with the show. Our 75th episode, the season 6 finale. Apex Predators. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem, killers, cannibals, and cults, fearful fiction and furious fact, tall tales, and terrible truths. This is a scary home companion. The two men, the two adversaries, sat at opposite ends of the park bench. It was the same park bench where Brother Frank Rourke had first met Lila Ambrose. The priest felt it was appropriate. Jack's duffel bag was sitting between he and the priest. Both men kept their hands on their laps, palms up, showing empty. "I'm surprised you didn't come in shooting, Jack," the priest said. "When your enemy asks you to parlay, you parlay. It's only fair." "Is that what you think this is? A parlay?" He got distracted looking around for the boy. Jack looked too, craning his neck and checking out the various clusters of kids. Where did he go? He was right behind me when I got here. The priest sucked on the child's tooth in his mouth. He liked the way it softly clicked against his own teeth when he shifted it back and forth. "You know of the effigy, don't you, Jack?" The one-eyed man nodded. "Sure, a ghastly one. The man on fire." The priest said, "Always burning, flesh roasting, fat liquefying and dripping down his legs, screaming in torment. The effigy is as old as the first time fire was used as a weapon, as an instrument of fear and destruction. He's not well known, but the effigy has his adherents, people who worship the burn." And he pointed across the park. "Do you see her?" Jack looked. He saw several groups of kids playing sport. He saw a half dozen people in wheelchairs near the bike path, talking with two women in surgical masks. He saw a boisterous man painting caricatures, while another man nearby tried to corral a group of retirees into a game of bocce ball. But past all that, finally, he saw what the priest was pointing out. There was a homeless woman, wrapped in too many layers of dirty clothing, wandering up the bike path from the boathouse into the park. This woman had scar tissue, dense pockets all over her neck, her face, her hands. She was muttering to herself as she walked. Yes, her. The priest spoke very calmly and gently. That woman has lived on these streets for almost 20 years by choice. She likes to set people on fire. Other homeless people, mostly, that's why she lives here. And so many animals, drug addicts, runaways. You get the picture. Right now, she is prepared to do something truly horrible. So please, Jack, no matter what happens, no matter how angry you may get at what I have to say, don't try and hurt me. Because even if she is not looking, she is watching, she is listening, she is with us. Jack said, "You mean she's an emissary?" The priest nodded. "With a thought, I can tell her to detonate." "With a thought?" Jack asked. "Is that how it works with you people? I've been trying to understand it, to figure it out, how you communicate with each other. But you all don't like talking very much, do you?" "Oh, I'm not like the others, Jack. I think you can sense that." There was a natural pause in the conversation. Neither man forced it, neither man looked at the other. They just took in the sounds of the park and the whistle of the wind on the water. Finally, the priest said, "You can't save her, you know." "Is that why I'm here? So you could tell me that?" "No, Jack. You're here because we are impressed. You are a lot more like us than you realize. People fear you. Your name is growing in power. You've become a sort of boogeyman." Jack chuckled, not out of humor, just for punctuation. "I'm the boogeyman for your people. You kill us, Jack, and when you do, we all feel it. We all watch it, hear it, experience it. And we have been watching you kill us for months. But you have to know that it's all pointless, drops in a bucket. You want your sister, you want your precious Becky, but no matter how many of us you kill, it doesn't matter. It brings you no closer." Jack was a regular visitor to several dream and nightmare message boards, so he was keeping current on the chatter about the return of the long black veil and how she had been calling out his name in dreams all around the world. Jack never had that dream. She couldn't come to him. None of the ghastly ones could. Ever since that sliver of mirror shard had run through his brain, ever since he came out of his coma, Jack didn't dream. He slept, but it was pure black nothing. No more dreams. The bond that you share with your twin is unlike any other. She's lonely, Jack. Becky misses you. Well, tell her she'll see me soon enough. You're not getting it. You can never go back there, ever. You can't save her, and you can never see her unless you come with me, unless I take you there. Saving her is beyond you. It is beyond any of you. Becky belongs to the island now, and she will never leave. But you can join her. You can join us. Now? The priest nodded. Right now. I have a boat. Jack looked around the park. The homeless lady was leaning against a tree near the fountain, and she wasn't looking at them. So he felt that it was time for his surprise. I have something for you in the bag, he said. There's a gun in there, but I am not going for the gun. I just want to unzip the bag and open it so you can see, and then we can go. The priest shifted in his seat. He looked around the park, making eye contact with each of his people. Jack slowly unzipped the duffel, revealing the severed head of the boy looking up at them. One of his open eyes bulged ever so slightly in and out as something foul and panicked wriggled through the brain matter behind it. Jack looked at his watch. I killed him 30 minutes ago, and you didn't know it until just now. That's something I didn't know before. I'm trying to learn how you communicate, and now I know that you slugs can't share thoughts, not right away. He snatched up his gun and jammed it under the priest's armpit, keeping it well hidden from public view. You fucking smug prick. You offer my sister back to me? She's not yours to offer, asshole. I know what you are. I know what's in your head, all of you. I plan to build my own bridge back to the island on your broken backs. I will... And then a child screamed, and another. Jack turned his gaze, but not his gun. The painter, Rory Silk, had his palette knife pressed against a little girl's throat. The man playing bocce ball, Dharmesh Anand, was brandishing an antique dagger, a fucking +2 dagger, standing over a fallen senior citizen. And the two women in surgical masks had each taken a wheelchair-bound hostage. One of them wielded a large scalpel, the other a gun. For a moment, the entire park fell silent. The attackers all stared at Rourke, waiting for direction. The homeless woman threw off one of her overcoats and revealed the 16 pipe bombs strapped to her chest and her back. Set the gun back in the bag, or everyone dies, Jack. The priest was dead calm. He knew that Jack would lower the gun. And he did. He gently put it back in the bag next to the child's severed head. The bookman is waiting for us, Jack, in that boathouse. Let's just go before anything bad happens. Suddenly, Manny Cortez appeared behind the homeless woman. He emerged from between two narrow trees as silent as a devil's whisper, as if coming out of nowhere. The woman never heard him coming. 20 feet away from her, he stopped, triangle stance, and shot her in the back of the head. She collapsed, dead on impact. And then she exploded. After that, it was bedlam. It felt like a war zone. Car and building alarms wailing, people screaming and running and crying, smoke in the air, the stink of scorched earth and flash-fried flesh. Manny lay writhing on the ground, needles of pipe shrapnel running down his left leg. His partners came for him, through the smoke and the terror, with guns drawn. In the chaos of the moment, the priest shoved Jack away, and he got up and ran. Just as Jack found his aim again at the running priest's back, Rory Silk came smashing into him with a running tackle, and both men tumbled to the ground. Jack dropped his gun, but quickly realized that for this guy, he didn't need a gun. Rory Silk was about as heavy, strong, and muscular as you would expect a TV painter to be, and that is not at all. So Jack grabbed him in a chokehold and smashed his head against the side of the park bench. Rory dropped his palette knife, and Jack picked it up. He pinned Rory to the ground and held the point of that knife to his eyelid. He looked around, but saw no priest. With all the panic and confusion, he had no idea where the priest had gone. So instead, as a consolation prize, he was going to kill this asshole and rip open his brain. Please, please, no, Jack, Rory begged. He wept. Please, I have something that you will want. Cortez was finally up on one knee, but he was functional. He waved off Cray and Sadie, his partners. No, go. I'm fine. I'll catch up. Where the park rolled downhill to the water's edge, the two women in surgical masks ran towards one of the boathouses. Dharmesh followed close behind them, as did the priest. Cray and Sadie looked at each other. They had strict orders to follow, but their loyalty was above all else to one another. Sadie said, I'll get Jack, you get them. Kill them all. They broke off running in opposite directions, just as Manny Cortez was getting to his feet. He looked towards Cray, turned his head, and looked after Sadie. Oregon Cray was still reeling mentally from what he had found on the walk towards the park. After losing sight of Jack and the boy for only a couple of minutes, he had found that child's headless corpse stuffed into a dumpster. According to Lila, the boss, they were supposed to save this man and recruit this man. But Jack was a child killer. It didn't make any sense. What did make sense was following this priest and his people and making them all still. Sadie was always talking about chasing big evil. And this priest was about as big an evil as Oregon Cray had ever seen. And he'd seen plenty. He approached the boathouse quickly, but cautiously. The door had been left half open, and he could hear them all inside, preparing to launch a boat. Cray saw shadows in the doorway moving away from him. They were on the run, it seemed, and they were not looking back. So he slipped through the half-cracked doorway without touching anything. Fluid stealth. Moving quickly down the hall, he saw a man walking towards him, a large Haitian, sea-worn and shirtless, with long, dirty dreadlocks and a gun in his hand. The bookman was actually startled by the sudden appearance of the Mohawk warrior, and Cray shot him twice in the forehead. He was moving past him before the bookman's twitching corpse had even hit the ground. And then the short hall opened up into the covered dock, which was freshly flooded with light from a metal door rolling up into the ceiling. The priest was on a boat, starting the engine, as Dharmesh rolled up the door. The two masked women stood on the dock in front of Cray, facing him, waiting for him. He aimed at them right as they took off their masks. Corinne Lee's face had been carved into a rictus grin from ear to ear, lipless and forever smiling, with swatches of her cheeks knotted into globs of white and pink scar tissue. Her breath hissed through torn nostrils. The second woman dropped her mask, and Oregon Cray slowly lowered his gun. When he saw her face, his limbs got heavy, and his head got light. Tanis? His voice cracked. Ori? She said. That is what she had called him since she could first talk. Ori, you found me. And then she shot him. Sadie moved through the war zone. Her gun was at her side, aimed at the ground. She found the park bench where the priest had been sitting, and nearby to that, she found Jack. He had Rory's silk on his belly on the ground, zip ties around his wrists and ankles, a gun pressed behind his ear. I can take you there, Rory was pleading for his life. The priest doesn't know where the painting is. Only I do. I hid it. I'm the only one that can take you to it. Sadie moved in, and Jack felt her coming and raised his gun to her. She kept hers aimed at the ground. You see how I'm not aiming, Jack? Real friendly like. Are you DRO? He asked. Even better. I'm not DRO. I saw you earlier. Why are you following me? Jack, I work for Lila Ambrose. I'm sure you know the name. She wants to talk to you, and I can guarantee that you are going to want to talk to her. Oregon Cray had drop-dead reflexes, nerves of steel. He was battle-tested under the most adverse of conditions. So his baby cousin Tanis didn't get the drop on him. It's not that she was faster than he was. He could have easily shot her down before she could have pulled that trigger. And if it had been anyone else in the world, he could have. He would have. But not her. Never Tanis. She was like his little sister. They'd been through so much together. And Oregon simply didn't have it in him to defend himself. Tanis shot him in the chest as he stood dumbstruck, watching on. The bullet chipped a rib and went in and out through his lung, which collapsed, as did he. The gun clattered from his hand. Blood started to flow. He tried to put pressure on the wound, but he couldn't draw breath. And the dots were already starting to dance in the corners of his eyes. Corinne knelt down across his chest. She was holding a very large scalpel. As she stepped onto the boat, Tanis looked a little sad. She said to Corinne, "Leave him his eyes, would you?" The boat started to rumble away as the woman with the split mouth started to carve Oregon Cray's face into something that resembled her own. He gasped for breath, but it would not come. And then something gave him focus. The searing, white-hot pain of the scalpel slitting open his cheek meat, digging deep, and Corinne pulling back a loose flap of skin. And he grabbed her wrist, twisting it, and with his other hand he plucked the scalpel from her tight grip, and he turned it on her. He started to hack and slash at her head. She got to her feet and tried to wrench herself free, but it didn't work. She just pulled him along with her as he got to his knees and kept slashing at the sides of her face, going for her eyes, hitting her scalp and her forehead and her ears, taking off chunks of her nose. The lower half of her face was already a mess, exposed teeth and glistening muscles laid bare, and now all the other parts were following suit. She grabbed that loose flap of his cheek and yanked on it. And that blinding pain, combined with the lack of oxygen, it finally got to him. Oregon dropped the scalpel. And he clung onto her with both hands to stay upright. Looking over her shoulder, he saw Manny Cortez stride into the room. Manny had a gun, but no clear shot. Corinne and Cray's heads were too close together. But there was no time to waste, so he dropped the gun, and Manny grabbed Corinne by the head. He was going to snap her neck. It was a move that he had done before. With one practiced hand gripping her forehead firmly, he put the other across the back of her head and viciously twisted counterclockwise in a snapping motion. Ordinarily, her neck would have popped like a party favor, and that would have been all she wrote. But you have to keep in mind that her face was half gone. Her upper face and scalp were now run through with dozens of tiny little cuts from the struggle. So her head did not turn, but her face did. Imagine for a second that you're putting on a Halloween mask, and it fits you perfectly. Then you grab each side of the mask and turn it around very quickly so that suddenly the eye holes are facing backward. This is what happened to Corinne Lee, except she wasn't wearing a mask. The little remaining connective tissue that she had tore free, and the skin of her face and scalp just sort of slid around on the gore that coated her skull. It sounded like a hungry dog licking congealed grease off a sticky floor. Until Cortez found himself staring at a pair of empty eye holes on the back of Corinne's head. And she died screaming and suffocating on the blood-slicked inside of her own scalp. Manny saw what he had done, and he vomited into the water. And then he saw that his brother was dying. Sadie looked into Jack's bag and slowly whistled in appreciation. Is that? Yeah, Jack said. That's the boy. That's an emissary in there. Rory mumbled into his gag, and Sadie scanned the park. She saw Cortez coming up over the rise. Cray was cradled in his arms, face and chest soaked with thick, oozing layers of blood. Cortez ran past them and towards the van. He's bleeding out, he shouted. Sadie looked at Jack. Are you coming? Thank you for listening to the Season 6 finale of A Scary Home Companion. Find the show on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can always contact the show directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. Please subscribe and review the show on whatever platform that you listen to. I really hope you enjoyed this story, and I hope it was a satisfying conclusion to a season that has been building to this all along. Before the season premiere, Closed Casket Jack, I knew this confrontation was coming. It just took 15 episodes to get all the pieces in play. Of course, we are still a good distance away from being done with this tale. Does Jack ride with Sadie? Does Oregon Cray survive? Actually, there is a clue in the episode called Kid Gloves that tells you the answer to that. Does Rory Silk still have that accursed painting, or is that a trick? What does Lila want with Jack? Where are the priest and his unholy clique off to next? Check out the show's Patreon page for a frank and open discussion of these questions, as well as an in-depth analysis of the episode and all new episodes. It's a great way to support the show and help us grow. The episode was edited and produced by Jeff Davidson, featuring music by Pinar with Numb Shadow Priest, Nangdo with Explosions of Soul, Pierced Arrows with Guns of Thunder, River Cult with Temples Perdu, and as always, Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music. Season 7 is coming before you know it. Lord only knows what fresh horrors await.